My son draped his arm around me like I was a dusty prop, laughing as he asked the crowd for $1 to endure a dinner with his boring mother. The humiliation burned hotter than the stage lights until a deep voice silenced the room. $1 million. That stranger did not just buy a meal. He bought the opening shot of a war that would bring my son's glittering empire crashing down to the ground. My name is Eleanor Price, and I am 57 years old. I stood in the shadow of a massive ice sculpture, tugging at the hem of a navy dress I had borrowed from my neighbour, Mrs. Gable. It was too tight around the waist and smelled faintly of mothballs, a stark contrast to the scent of fresh orchids and expensive cologne that filled the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. My shoes were 5 years old, scuffed at the heels, and my feet ached against the marble floor. I felt like a stain on a silk sheet, completely invisible among the swirling galaxy of sequins and tuxedos. Everywhere I looked, cameras flashed. They were hungry mechanical eyes devouring the room, live streaming the night to the world. My son, Landon Price, was the main course. He moved through the crowd of tech moguls and hedge fund managers like a shark in a gold-plated tank. They called him the startup genius, the golden boy of Silicon Valley. I just called him the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knees. I watched him from afar, feeling a strange mix of pride and alienation as he discussed initial public offerings and summer homes in the Riviera with men who owned islands. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, announcing a surprise twist to the evening. It was an auction, he explained, but not for art or vintage wine. They were auctioning people. CEOs offered power lunches. Actresses offered tennis matches. It was a game for the rich to trade favors under the guise of charity. I clapped along, my hands numb, just waiting for the night to end so I could take the train back to my quiet, empty apartment and soak my feet. Then Landon looked at me. His smile was sharp, breathless, and terrifying. He bounded off the stage and cut through the crowd. Before I could protest, his hand clamped around my wrist. He dragged me up the stairs, the spotlight blinding me instantly. I stumbled, nearly twisting my ankle in those old shoes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Landon shouted into the microphone, his arm heavy around my shoulders like I was a cardboard cutout. "We have auctioned off the innovators and the stars. But now, for the most interesting lot of the night, I give you my mother." There was a ripple of confused applause. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I tried to pull away slightly, but his grip was iron. "Start the bidding low." Landon laughed, the sound booming through the speakers. "This is a dinner with the woman who still doesn't know how to use her iPhone. A riveting evening with my boring mom, who knows absolutely nothing about this world we built." Laughter erupted. It wasn't warm. It was sharp and jagged. Someone whistled from the back. $1, Landon yelled, grinning at the crowd. $1 for the woman who thinks the cloud is actual weather. Come on. Just for fun, my face burned so hot I thought my skin would blister. I tried to smile, to be a good sport, but my lips felt glued to my teeth. I was a prop. A joke. $2, a man in a tuxedo shouted from the front row, raising his glass of scotch towards me in a mock toast. $5. Another voice chimed in. $10. Does she cook? Someone jeered. They were bidding on me like I was a chipped vase at a yard sale. The numbers crawled up, agonizingly slow. $20. $25. Then silence. The room grew bored. The joke had run its course. Landon looked at the crowd, then down at me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Sold to nobody $25. Actually, let's just stop. Nobody wants my mom. She is too boring even for charity. Right. Sorry, Mom. The blood drained from my face. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. I wanted to sink through the floorboards. I wanted to vanish into the air. Going once. The MC started, looking uncomfortable, ready to move on to the next item. $1 million. The voice was deep, cold, and cut through the laughter like a guillotine blade. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Every head turned toward the back of the room. A man stood up slowly. He wore a black suit that looked darker than the shadows around him. It was Noah Caldwell. I recognized him from the business magazines Landon left on his coffee table. He was the investor everyone feared, the man who could make or break companies with a single phone call. He was not smiling. His gaze was fixed on Landon, hard and unyielding. Then, for a fleeting second, his eyes shifted to me. The hardness vanished, replaced by something that looked terrifyingly like recognition. $1 million, Noah repeated, his voice steady. For the dinner? Flashbulbs exploded like a supernova. The room erupted into chaos. People were screaming about a viral moment, shouting about brand awareness. Landon looked stunned, his mouth slightly open. But all I felt was a cold chill settling deep in my bones. I had been stripped naked in front of the world for $25. And now, a stranger had just bought me for $1 million. I sat on the edge of a velvet love seat in the staging room behind the main stage, clutching a plastic cup of lukewarm water. My hands were shaking so violently that the water rippled in tiny, concentric circles. Through the thick walls, I could still hear the muffled thump of bass and the roar of laughter from the ballroom. It sounded like a party on a different planet, one where I was the punchline that everyone had already forgotten. I felt stripped, not of my clothes, but of my dignity. The door swung open and Landon breezed in. He was smiling at someone in the hallway, a dazzling, camera-ready grin. But the moment he closed the door, his face went slack and cold. He checked his reflection in the vanity mirror, adjusting his bow tie. "You have no idea how much traffic that just generated," he said, not looking at me. "The hashtag is already trending." "You should be grateful. Mom, I just made you the most talked-about woman in New York for 15 minutes. You humiliated me," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You sold me for $25. Landon sighed, turning to look at me with impatient eyes. It was a bit... Mom, it is called irony. Besides, Noah Caldwell bid $1 million. The fund is happy. I am happy. Stop acting like a victim. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not offer me a ride home. He just checked his phone, grimaced at a text message, and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the silence. A moment later, a young woman with a headset peeked in. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Price, mister? Caldwell is asking to see you. It is part of the auction terms. The winner gets a private meeting." My stomach turned over. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy as lead. I followed her down a long corridor to a small, quiet conference room, away from the noise. Noah Caldwell was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He held a paper cup of black coffee, not champagne. Without the flashing cameras. He looked older than he had in the ballroom. He was maybe in his early 60s, with deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes that looked incredibly tired. "Mrs. Price," he said, turning to face me. His voice was not mocking. It was low and serious. Please, sit down. I remained standing, clutching my purse against my chest like a shield. Why, I asked. Why would you spend $1 million on a joke? Do you think this is funny? Noah took a sip of his coffee. I did not buy you. Eleanor, I bought the room, and I bought his attention. Landon cannot ignore a 7-figure donor. He is too greedy for that. I stepped back, narrowing my eyes. You do not know my son, and you certainly do not know me. I know you were a nurse at Mercy General in Ohio for 30 years. Noah said quietly. I know you worked double shifts in the ER to pay for his private math tutors. I know you sold your house on Elm Street, the one you and your late husband built just to cover his first seed round. The air left my lungs. How? He took a step closer, his expression softening. I also know that once his company hit the cover of Forbes, he stopped answering your calls. He cut you off for 3 years. Eleanor, until tonight, when he needed a prop. Who are you? I asked, my voice trembling. Noah set his coffee down on the mahogany table. Landon has a habit of using people as stepping stones. He consumes them and throws the husks away. He did it to you tonight. He paused, and a shadow passed over his face. He did it. To my son. He was Landon's partner in the beginning. My boy lost his reputation, his savings, and eventually, he lost his life because Landon needed a scapegoat. I stared at him, horror rising in my throat. I wanted to defend Landon. It was my instinct, woven into my DNA. But the memory of Landon's cold laugh on stage choked me. I paid $1 million to buy the right to tell a story, Noah said, his voice hard as flint. Not the story of the Gala, but the story your son has been running from his whole life. I want to know what he does to the people who trust him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white card with a phone number on it. He placed it gently in my hand. Go home. Eleanor, think about it. I walked out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt a strange, terrifying sensation spreading through my chest. It was the fierce urge to protect my child, warring with a cold, creeping realization that the boy I raised had died a long time ago, and the man who took his place was a monster. I looked down at the card in my hand. It felt heavy, like a weapon I did not know how to use. The train rattled through the darkness of the New Jersey countryside, the rhythmic clacking of the wheels acting as a harsh lullaby. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass, staring at my reflection. I did not see the woman in the borrowed navy dress anymore. I saw the ghost of myself from 20 years ago. I saw the tired nurse with dark circles under her eyes, smelling of antiseptic and floor wax, walking out of Mercy General at 6 a.m. after a 12-hour shift. I closed my eyes and the memories washed over me. Not warm and fuzzy, but sharp enough to cut. I remembered Landon at 8 years old, sitting in the hospital waiting room because I could not afford a babysitter. He was swinging his legs on the plastic chair, clutching a box of sugary cereal I had bought from the vending machine for dinner. Mom, he had said, his eyes wide and full of sleep. When I am big, I am going to buy you a house 10 times bigger than ours. It will have a swimming pool inside so you never have to mop a floor again. I had hugged him then, burying my face in his hair, believing him. I believed him when I sat at our chipped kitchen table night after night, scissors in hand, clipping 50-cent coupons for laundry detergent. I remembered the winter of 2005. I had to choose between refilling my blood pressure medication or buying him the advanced calculus textbooks he needed for the accelerated program. I bought the books. I walked around with a pounding headache for 3 months, telling myself it was an investment in his future. When he got into Stanford, the financial aid package was good, but not enough to cover the lifestyle he wanted. He wanted to fit in. He wanted to be like the boys whose fathers owned dealerships and factories. So I sold the house. The house my husband and I had bought with our wedding money. I moved into a studio apartment above a noisy laundromat in a bad part of town. I sent him checks every month so he could go out for pizza and buy decent shirts. "Thanks, Mum," he used to say. "You are the best." But then the startup happened. He moved to San Francisco. The calls became shorter. The text messages became one-word answers. "Mum, you would not understand," became his catchphrase. Or, "I am really busy right now. Can we talk next month? I remembered the dinner 3 years ago. It was the last time we really talked. He had flown me out to the city, treating me to a meal at a restaurant where the menu had no prices. He looked so handsome in his tailored suit, but his eyes were calculating. "Mom," he had said, leaning over the table, his voice low so the waiter would not hear. "I have a big profile coming out in Wired magazine. If they call you, maybe don't mention the waitressing or the double shifts. It makes my brand look like poverty porn. We want visionary, not charity case." "Okay," I had nodded, the lobster bisque turning to ash in my mouth. That was the day I realized I was not his mother anymore. I was a PR liability. After that, I only saw him on television. I read articles about the self-made billionaire who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, with no mention of the woman who held the ladder steady until her hands bled. The train slowed as it approached my station in Pennsylvania. I walked the 4 blocks to my apartment in the freezing wind. Inside, it was cold and quiet. I sat on my sagging sofa and pulled out my phone. A neighbor had sent me the clip from the Gala. I played it. $1 for my boring mum. Landon laughed on the tiny screen. She does not understand this world. I watched it again. And again. I watched the way he shoved me forward. I watched the way he laughed when the bidding stalled at $25. Something inside me, something that had held on for 30 years, finally snapped. It was not a loud break. It was the quiet, dry sound of a dead branch giving way. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just a prop. He had forgotten who taught him how to walk. I reached into my purse and pulled out the heavy cardstock Noah Caldwell had given me. My fingers trembled. Not from fear this time, but from a cold, simmering rage. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. My thumb hovered over the red button. I panicked. The instinct to protect my boy, the habit of a lifetime, flared up one last time. I disconnected the call before he could answer. I sat there in the dark, the phone clutched in my hand like a grenade I had just unpinned. I had hung up, yes, but I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was going to call back. The seed was planted, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to let it grow into something poisonous. I dialed the number on the card again. This time, I did not hang up. Noah answered on the first ring, his voice clear and immediate, as if he had been sitting by the phone staring at it, willing it to ring. He gave me an address in the financial district and told me to come alone. The building was a pre-war limestone tower. the kind that smelled of old money and secrets. There was no company name on the directory for the 40th floor. The elevator opened directly into a space that felt less like an office and more like a war room. The blinds were drawn, slicing the afternoon sun into dusty strips. Noah was not alone. Sitting around a glass table were 3 other people, a woman with sharp glasses who introduced herself as a forensic accountant, a man with the weary posture of a disgraced auditor, and a younger woman typing furiously on a laptop who I recognized from bylines in the Wall Street Journal. They all looked up when I entered. They did not smile. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and assessment. "Thank you for coming." "Eleanor," Noah said, gesturing to a chair. "What is this?" I asked. Remaining standing. "A support group, a jury," the woman with the glasses said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. "Of sorts." Noah walked over to a whiteboard covered in complex diagrams. "We have been tracking Landon's financials for 2 years. The gala last night. It was not about charity. It was a washing machine." He tapped a red circle on the board. "The donations go into the foundation. Then they are routed through shell companies in the Caymans as consulting fees and licensing rights. And they come back into the startup as revenue." He is inflating his numbers before the initial public offering. "The scholarships, the hospitals, they are just the packaging for dirty money." I felt the room spin. "Landon is ambitious," I said, my voice defensive. "But he is not a criminal. He would not." "He would." Noah cut in softly. "He did it to Thomas." The name hung in the air. Noah turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw the raw, jagged grief beneath his composure. Thomas was my son. He was Landon's co-founder in the garage days. When a compliance issue came up 5 years ago, Landon doctored the emails to make it look like Thomas did it alone. Thomas lost his license. He lost his reputation. Noah's voice broke, and he took a slow breath. He took his own life 6 months later. Landon sent flowers to the funeral. He wrote it off as a business expense. I felt sick. I wanted to cover my ears. "Why are you telling me this? Do you want me to destroy my own son to avenge yours? I am not a spy." "Mr. Caldwell, I am a mother." I turned to leave, my hand reaching for the door handle. I could not do this. I could not be the knife in Landon's back. "Wait," the lawyer said. She picked up a remote control. "Just listen to this." It was recorded 3 months ago during a strategy meeting with his top investors. She pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was Landon's voice. There was no mistaking that confident, smooth baritone. "The poverty angle is tricky," Landon's voice said from the speakers. "We do not want to look desperate, but we keep the mother story in the pocket. She is a backup asset, a brand card I have not flipped over yet. If the stock dips after the IPO, we bring her out. The struggling single mum, the tears, the reunion, it is gold. But for now, keep her hidden. She is, frankly, embarrassing." The recording ended with the sound of laughter. Landon's laughter. I stood frozen. A backup asset. Not a person. Not the woman who worked double shifts to buy him shoes. An asset. A card in a deck. "If you walk away," Noah said gently, "we will release what we have. It will be messy. The company will implode overnight. Thousands of innocent employees will lose their jobs. The pension funds invested in him will crash. It will be a slaughter." He paused. "But if you help us, we can control the demolition. We can make sure only the guilty fall." The room was silent. I looked down at my hands. They were rough, the skin dry from years of scrubbing hospital floors and washing dishes. I remembered the patients I had advocated for when doctors tried to cut corners. I remembered the oath I took as a nurse to do no harm. And then I remembered the sound of Landon auctioning me off for $1. I looked up. The fear was gone. In its place was something cold and hard, like steel tempering in fire. "I will help you," I said. And my voice sounded strange to my own ears, steady and dangerous. But let one thing be clear. I am not doing this for Thomas, and I am not doing this for you. Noah. I locked eyes with him. This will be my story, not yours. The plan began with a surrender, or at least the appearance of one. Noah's team had predicted that once the internet backlash from the auction turned ugly, Landon's public relations team would scramble for damage control. They were right. 3 days later, my phone rang. Mom. Landon's voice was soft, dripping with a humility that sounded almost practiced. "I have been doing a lot of thinking. I was terrible the other night. The stress of the launch got to me. I want to make it right. Will you come back to the city? We can do a video, just you and me, talking, to show everyone we are okay." "Of course." "Honey," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound like a relieved mother. "I just want us to be a family again." I hung up and looked at the black duffel bag on my bed. Inside was a new smartphone Noah had given me, preloaded with recording software that ran in the background, around my neck. I clasped a silver pendant shaped like a teardrop. It looked like costume jewelry, something a son might buy his mother at a department store. But it was a high-fidelity microphone capable of picking up a whisper from 10 feet away. When I arrived at Landon's glass-walled office in Manhattan, the cameras were already set up. Landon rushed to me, embracing me in a hug that felt warm but ended exactly when the director yelled, "Cut." That was great. "Mom," Landon said, releasing me and immediately turning to his PR manager. "Make sure we edit out the part where I look at the teleprompter. I need to look authentic. The headline is Redemption. I want the investors to see a man who can admit his mistakes." I sat on the plush leather sofa, nodding and dabbing at dry eyes. "Whatever helps you, Landon." For the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I was the prop. I was paraded through the company headquarters, introduced to young coders and exhausted interns as the inspiration behind the drive. I sat in the corner of high-end steakhouses while Landon entertained potential investors, because I was just the boring mum who did not understand business. They spoke as if I were a piece of furniture. That donation from Caldwell was a lifesaver. I heard the CFO whisper one evening over a plate of Wagyu beef. It plugged the hole in the Q3 earnings perfectly. "We can categorize it as operational revenue if we route it through the foundation correctly." I took a sip of water, my hand brushing against the pendant at my throat, ensuring it caught every syllable. By night, in the sterile luxury apartment Landon had rented for me, I became a student of espionage. Noah's team had taught me how to use encrypted messaging apps and how to upload large audio files to a secure server. I sat up until 2 in the morning, transcribing notes into a small spiral notebook, a habit from my nursing days when I had to track vitals and medication schedules. But instead of blood pressure readings, I wrote down times, dates, and phrases like offshore accounts and inflated user metrics. One night, the reality of what I was doing nearly broke me. It was late, and I was staying in the guest room of Landon's penthouse. I woke up to the sound of his voice pacing on the terrace. I crept to the door, cracking it open just an inch. "You do not understand." Landon was hissing into his phone. "If we do not get the valuation up by Friday, the IPO is dead in the water. Just inflate the numbers. Who is going to check? We will use the second charity fund. People are stupid. They see a sob story and they open their wallets. They are used to buying tears." My pen hovered over the paper in the dark. People are stupid. He was talking about the public. He was talking about Noah. He was talking about me. I wrote it down, underlining the time, my handwriting jagged. The next evening, we were standing on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The cameras were off. Landon leaned against the railing, holding a glass of scotch. He looked stripped down, his shoulders slumped. "It is so loud," he said quietly, staring at the grid of traffic below. "Everyone wants a piece of me. Mum, if I stop running for 1 second, they will eat me alive. I am scared sometimes." For a moment, the ice around my heart cracked. I saw the 8-year-old boy who used to be afraid of thunderstorms. My hand twitched, wanting to reach out and smooth the hair back from his forehead. To tell him that we could fix this, that he could stop lying and just come home. "Landon." I started, my voice soft. He turned to look at me, and for a split second, I thought he saw me, really saw me. Then his phone buzzed. The vulnerability vanished instantly, replaced by the mask of the CEO. "I have to take this," he said, turning his back on me. "It is the lawyers." I stood there in the cold wind, my hand moving up to clutch the silver pendant. I squeezed it until the metal bit into my palm. I had almost let him go. I had almost let the mother in me ruin the justice that Noah, Thomas, and all his other victims deserved. I closed my eyes and breathed in the city air. I would not make that mistake again. I was not his mother tonight. I was the witness he never saw coming. The wall of the safe house looked like the inside of a conspiracy theorist's mind. But this was no theory. My weeks of spying had borne fruit. We had pinned every recording, every snapshot of a ledger, and every rushed note I had scribbled onto a massive corkboard. Red yarn connected the dots. It started at the Charity Foundation, zigzagged through 3 shell companies in the British Virgin Islands, and ended quietly in Landon's private accounts. It was a masterpiece of fraud, designed to pump up revenue figures right before the initial public offering. "This is it," the forensic accountant said, tapping a marker against the board. "The gala next week is not a party. It is a deadline. He needs the donations to hit the account by Friday to cover the shortfall in Q3 earnings. If he misses it, the valuation collapses." Noah stood by the window, looking out at the grey skyline. "We do not just want to stop the money," he said, turning to the group. "We want to kill the reputation. If we send this to the SEC now, it gets buried in investigation for months. Landon spins it, settles it, and moves on. We need to strike when the lights are brightest." The plan was terrifyingly simple. The second gala was being billed as a global event, live-streamed to millions across 3 platforms. The press would be there. The investors would be watching. It was the peak of Landon's career, the moment he would sell his story to the world one last time before the stock market bell rang. The journalist sat with her laptop open. "I have the article written," she said, her finger hovering over the enter key. 3,000 words. Interviews with former employees. The analysis of the leaked documents, the audio clips Eleanor got. It is locked and loaded. As soon as you give the signal, I hit publish. It will be on every financial news feed in the world within 30 seconds. But the key to the lock was me. I had to get back on that stage. I found Landon in the flower arrangement room of the event center, critiquing the shade of blue in the hydrangeas. He looked up when I entered, checking his watch. "I have an idea," I said, keeping my voice steady, channeling every ounce of courage I had left. "For the gala, I want to speak." Landon frowned, his instinct to silence me flaring up. "Mom, we talked about this. You just wave and smile, no speeches. We cannot risk, you know, you being boring." "No," I pressed, stepping closer. "Not a speech about me. A speech about us. About how I forgive you. About how we want to help other single mothers so they do not have to struggle like I did." Think about it. Landon. The narrative. The prodigal son and the saintly mother reunited. It turns the auction scandal into a redemption arc. I watched the gears turn in his head. I saw the greed override the caution. He did not see a mother wanting to heal. He saw a headline. He saw dollar signs. "A redemption arc," he whispered, a smile spreading across his face. That is actually brilliant. We can have the camera zoom in on your face when you talk about the struggle. Maybe squeeze out a tear. Can you do that?" "I think I can manage a tear," I said. And for once, I was not lying. Landon clapped his hands, energized. "Okay, I will tell the production team. We will put you right in the middle of the program. Peak viewership. This is going to be huge." While Landon was busy choreographing his own execution, Noah was finalizing the blade. He had tracked down a senior technician from the streaming company, a man Landon had fired 2 years ago for requesting paternity leave. The man was all too eager to help. He gave Noah's team a back door into the presentation software. Everything was aligned. The legal briefs were printed. The article was ready. The investors were silent, waiting for the crash. And Landon. He was currently yelling at an intern about the font size on the dinner menus, completely unaware that the ground beneath his feet was already gone. He was building a monument to himself, not realizing he was actually digging his own grave. 7 days before the second gala, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted from celebratory to poisonous. I was sitting in the living room pretending to read a magazine when Landon burst in, his face the color of old ash. He threw his tablet onto the sofa. Someone had sent him an anonymous email containing a 10-second audio clip, my recording of him calling me a backup asset. The sender demanded $500,000 in cryptocurrency, or the rest of the file would be released to the press. Panic tore through the office like a fever. Landon screamed at his assistants, convinced there was a mole in his inner circle. He ordered a complete electronic sweep of the headquarters and the apartment. I watched from the kitchen doorway as a team of security consultants scanned the lamps, the smoke detectors, and the furniture. My heart hammered against my ribs as one of them waved a wand over my handbag, where the recording device usually sat. Thankfully, I had hidden the silver pendant inside a hollowed-out heel of my spare shoes in the closet just minutes before they arrived. An hour later, I was summoned to a small glass-walled room, Landon's general counsel. A man with a smile like a shark sat across from me. "Mrs. Price," he said, his voice sickeningly sweet. "We just want to make sure you are safe. Have you spoken to anyone?" Unusual lately. Any reporters, anyone asking specific questions about the accounts, I gripped my hands in my lap, channeling every ounce of the confused, overwhelmed mother I was supposed to be. I do not understand, I stammered, making my lower lip tremble. I only talk to my sister in Ohio. Is Landon in trouble? Did I do something wrong? He studied me for a long moment, looking for a crack in the porcelain. Then he sighed, dismissing me as too simple to be a threat. No. Eleanor, you are fine. Just be careful. I walked out into the corridor and found Landon standing by the emergency exit. He was smoking a cigarette, his hand shaking slightly as he brought it to his lips. He had told Fortune magazine he treated his body like a temple. But right now, he looked like a man watching the temple burn. Mum, he said, not looking at me. You know, if anyone betrays me right now, I will wipe them out. I will make sure they never work again. I will erase them. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, hacking sound. A chill went down my spine. He was not talking about firing people. He was talking about destruction. That night, I met Noah in a different location, a noisy diner where we could not be overheard. I slammed my hand on the table, rattling the silverware. It was you, I hissed. You sent that email. You blackmailed him. Noah did not flinch. He slowly stirred cream into his coffee. I needed to see his response protocol. I needed to know who he calls when he is cornered. And now we know. You risked everything I whispered furiously. They swept the apartment. They almost found the microphone. You are using me as bait. Noah, just like he used Thomas. You are no better than him. Noah stopped stirring. He looked up, and for a second, I saw the ruthless operator beneath the grieving father. We are in a war. Eleanor, casualties happen. Not me, I said, my voice dropping to a register I did not know I possessed. If you pull a stunt like that again, I will walk into the FBI offices myself tomorrow morning. I will hand them the drive, and I will tell them you withheld evidence. Do not test me. Noah stared at me, surprised by the steel in my spine. He nodded slowly, agreeing to back off, but his eyes shifted away too quickly. I knew he was holding something back. He had another card to play, one involving investors far more dangerous than the Securities and Exchange Commission, but he kept it to himself. The fallout from the blackmail was swift. The next morning, Landon announced he was firing the original production crew. He hired a private security firm to manage the gala, men with thick necks and earpieces who looked more like mercenaries than event staff. Worse, he moved the live stream control to an external company with military-grade encryption. We are locking it down, Landon told the staff. No glitches, no leaks. I relayed this to Noah, and I could hear the panic in his team's background. They had to rewrite their entire technical injection plan in 48 hours. Late that night, unable to sleep, I wandered past Landon's study. The door was ajar. He was on the phone, his back to me. The money must be in Zurich by midnight on Friday, he was saying, his voice low. Yes, I have the second passport. If this goes sideways, I need to be gone before the market opens on Monday. I froze in the shadows. He was speaking to a man with a cold, Central European accent. I realized then that Landon was not just fighting to save his company, he was preparing to abandon it. If our plan failed, he would not go to prison. He would vanish into the ether with millions of dollars, leaving the ruins of his empire and me behind to burn. The night of the second gala felt less like a charity event and more like a coronation. It was happening simultaneously in 3 major cities, linked by satellite. with a massive LED screen behind the main stage in New York that stretched 50 feet high. The hashtag for the event was already trending worldwide before the appetizers were even served. I sat in the dressing room, staring at a stranger in the mirror. The company stylist had encased me in a silk gown that cost more than my first house. My hair was sprayed into an obedient helmet of silver, and my makeup was flawless, hiding every line of worry on my face. I looked like the perfect mother of a CEO. I looked like a lie. Landon was pacing in the wings, muttering to himself. He was rehearsing his emotional beats like a dancer counting steps from the ashes of poverty. Pause. Look down. To the heights of innovation, he whispered, placing a hand over his heart. He checked his reflection, adjusted his smile by a millimeter, and did it again. It was mechanical. It was chilling. I clutched my small beaded handbag. Inside, nestled next to a tube of lipstick, was a silver USB drive. It contained a hard copy of every document, every recording, and every damning email we had gathered. It was my backup plan. In my years as a nurse, I always carried a trauma kit, hoping I would never have to use it. Tonight, I was carrying a weapon that would definitely be used. Noah's team had rigged the system. They had bypassed the new security protocols through a sympathetic insider in the live stream booth. They were waiting for one specific signal, a verbal key. As soon as I said the prearranged sentence, the polished presentation behind us would vanish, replaced by the ugly, raw truth of Landon's fraud. And now, the master of ceremonies' voice boomed through the stadium-quality speakers. Please, welcome the woman who started it all. Eleanor Price. The music swelled. It was a soaring, inspirational, orchestral piece. The lights blinded me as Landon took my hand and led me onto the stage. The applause was deafening. It washed over us like a physical wave. Landon stepped to the podium, his face transforming instantly into a mask of humble gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "We all make mistakes. My mistake was forgetting where I came from. I grew up with nothing but the love of this incredible woman." He gestured to me. "My mom. She is the unsung hero. She worked night shifts. She scrubbed floors. And I made a stupid joke because I was afraid to show you how much I owe her." The audience made a collective sound of sympathy. I saw people wiping their eyes. He had them in the palm of his hand. He was selling the story of us, and the price was his freedom. "Mom," Landon said, turning to me and handing me the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words?" This was the moment. I felt the weight of millions of eyes on me. I looked out into the darkness beyond the lights and imagined Noah sitting there, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. One wrong word, one stutter, and the feed would not cut. The evidence would stay buried. Landon would board a plane to Zurich with his stolen millions, and I would be left alone in the wreckage. I reached for the microphone. Landon stepped in close, wrapping his arm around my shoulders in a hug that looked affectionate to the cameras but felt like a vice. His fingers dug painfully into my collarbone. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear, and whispered so low that only I and the hidden microphone in my necklace could hear. "Remember what I told you about the consequences if you mess this up. Do not test me." He pulled back, smiling that perfect, shark-like smile, waiting for me to read the script on the teleprompter. I looked at the scrolling text. It was full of lies about forgiveness and pride. I looked at Landon. Then I looked straight into the camera lens, past the lights, past the fear. I took a deep breath. Sometimes the only way a mother can save her child, I said, my voice ringing out clear and steady, is to tell the truth, even if it burns this whole room down. The moment the last word left my lips, the massive LED screen behind us did not just flicker, it convulsed. The slide showing the smiling children from the orphanage vanished instantly. In its place, a spreadsheet materialized, 50 feet high and glowing with a harsh, unforgiving light. It was a sea of jagged red numbers, with thick black arrows drawing a clear, damning line from the charity foundation directly to Landon's personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. Chaos erupted in the control booth. I could not see them, but I knew the insider had done his job. He had locked the system hard, paralyzing the computers. The production crew was screaming into their headsets, frantically trying to cut the feed, but the live stream was unstoppable. It was beaming the evidence to 3 continents in real time. Landon spun around, his mouth falling open, before he could shout a command. The audio shifted. The inspirational orchestral music cut out with a screech. Then, Landon's own voice, recorded just days ago in his penthouse, boomed over the speakers, amplified to a deafening volume. The poverty angle is tricky, but we keep the mother story in the pocket. She is a backup asset, a brand card I have not flipped over yet. If the stock dips, we bring her out. The silence that fell over the grand ballroom was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. Then, it broke. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by the sharp, electric sound of 1,000 people whispering at once, the investors in the front row, men who controlled billions of dollars, stood up. They were not applauding. They were reaching for their phones. Landon laughed, but it was a manic, terrified sound. He turned back to the crowd, spreading his arms wide, sweat already breaking out on his forehead. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a technical malfunction. A competitor is hacking our feed. Please, ignore the screen. It is all fake. He signaled frantically to the wings for the technicians to cut the power. Instead, the head of private security sprinted onto the stage, his face pale. He leaned into Landon, but the lapel microphone picked up his frantic whisper. "Sir, we cannot stop it. The signal has been hijacked at the source. It is broadcasting everywhere. Simultaneously, a wave of light swept through the darkened audience as every smartphone lit up. The investigative article had just dropped. I could see people reading the headline, their eyes darting from their screens to the stage. The link was spreading like wildfire on Twitter, pushed by every tech blog and financial news outlet in the country. The comments on the live stream were scrolling so fast, they were a blur of rage and shock. I stood in the eye of the hurricane. My microphone was still live. I gripped it with both hands, my knuckles white. "He told you he was a self-made man," I said, my voice trembling but clear, cutting through the murmurs. "But he started by selling me for $1. He called me boring because I spent 30 years wiping blood and vomit off hospital floors so he could have the tuition money he needed to build this." I looked at him. He was staring at the screen, where a video was now playing of him discussing how to launder the Gala money to inflate the IPO price. "He called me a prop," I said, looking directly into the camera lens. "So I decided to show you exactly what he built his stage on." In the VIP section, Landon's legal team was scrambling, shouting into their phones, but they were cut off. The double doors at the back of the room burst open. A group of men and women in dark windbreakers marched in. They moved with the undeniable authority of federal law enforcement. Noah had timed it perfectly. The Securities and Exchange Commission investigators, flanked by agents from the FBI, were moving down the center aisle. Landon saw them. The arrogance drained out of his face, leaving him looking like a frightened child. He took a step toward the wings, trying to flee, but two security guards stepped in his path. They were not there to protect him anymore. They were there to contain him. Mr. Price! A federal agent shouted from the floor, his badge glinting under the stage lights. Stay right where you are. Do not move. Landon froze. He looked left, then right, then back at me. The crowd was jeering now, a wall of noise and flashing cameras capturing his ruin. He was trapped in the spotlight he had coveted so desperately, pinned down by the very attention he had bought. He was the center of the world, just like he always wanted, and it was destroying him. The police cleared the ballroom, ushering the stunned guests out into the New York night. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of technicians dismantling the equipment that had broadcast my son's ruin to the world. I was led down a quiet corridor to a holding room at the back of the venue. Landon was sitting on a metal folding chair. His tuxedo jacket was thrown on the floor. His tie was undone, and his hair, usually perfect, was sticking up in wild tufts. His hands were shaking, but when he looked up at me, his eyes were still burning with a defiant, desperate rage. A federal agent stood by the door, checking his watch. He is being detained for questioning regarding securities fraud and money laundering, the agent said, his voice flat and professional. We are taking him in 10 minutes. You have 5 minutes to talk, but keep it in our line of sight. The agent stepped back, and the heavy door clicked shut, though not all the way. Landon stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. You conspired with them, he spat, his voice cracking. You shook hands with the enemy. You destroyed my life, my company, everything I built. And for what? Because I hurt your feelings. Because I embarrassed you for 5 minutes on a stage. He began to pace the small room, his gestures frantic. I was the victim here. Mum, I was under pressure. The market, the investors, the payroll. You have no idea what it takes to keep $1 billion valuation afloat. I did what I had to do. I stood by the door, clutching my purse. I did not interrupt him. I let him pour out every drop of his poisonous justification. When he finally stopped, panting for breath, I stepped forward. Did you ever think about the lives of the people you used as stepping stones? I asked softly. From Thomas, to his son, to your own mother, did you ever stop to think that we were people, not just assets on a spreadsheet? Landon let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, grow up, Mum. Everyone uses everyone. That is how the world works. You are so naive. The world does not give prizes to nice people. It eats them. He glared at me, his face twisting with resentment. I did all of this to get away from the life you gave me. I did not want to clip coupons at a kitchen table. I did not want to be you. I dragged myself out of that poverty, and you just dragged me right back down. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the urge to apologize for being poor. I did not feel the weight of his blame. You had a choice, Landon, I said, my voice steady. Every time you sold a person, every time you lied, you signed another sentence for yourself. You think I did this to punish you. Today is just the day you finally get the bill for what you ordered. He stared at me, his lip curling. Are you happy? He whispered, Are you satisfied seeing your son go to prison? I am not happy, I answered, and I felt a tear finally roll down my cheek. I am heartbroken, but I am relieved, because someone finally stopped you before you destroyed anyone else. Someone stopped you before you completely destroyed yourself. The door opened wide. The agent stepped in, holding a pair of handcuffs. Time is up, Mr. Price. Landon flinched as the cold metal locked around his wrists. The reality of it seemed to hit him all at once. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a terrifying clarity. He looked back at me over his shoulder. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fury, panic, and a sudden, childish pleading. He realized, in that second, that there was no spin doctor, no press release, and no check big enough to fix this. I looked straight at him. I did not promise to wait. I did not promise to fix it. If one day you really want to live like a human being, and not a brand, I said, you know where I am, but from now on, you will never use me to run away again. The agents led him out. I watched him walk down the long, concrete hallway, the sound of his expensive shoes and the clinking chains fading into the distance. I was alone in the room. I reached up and unclasped the silver teardrop necklace. It felt heavy in my hand, warm from my skin. It was the tool that had brought down an empire. I walked over to the trash can by the door and dropped it in. It hit the bottom with a dull thud. I pushed open the exit door and stepped out into the cool night air. The city was loud and bright, indifferent to the tragedy that had just played out. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt clean. I left the gala, the millions of dollars, and the wreckage of my son's ambition behind me. I walked toward the subway station, my step light, ready to go home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please drop a comment down below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on today's events. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.